Hello, Laura J. E. Hamilton here with the first podcast of the Peaceful Inner Warriors United series, bringing you an opportunity to connect with truth at a deeper level. Not to say that all that will be shared will resonate with you, but it is to say that this is a space where you are encouraged to choose. Choice comes with power. Power comes with responsibility, and we must become ones who are able to respond, particularly during charged times like we find ourselves in with the pandemic that conspiracy theorists would say was a plandemic. There is so much misinformation and disinformation available right now that it is difficult to know what to believe. And that is exactly the point. We have been conditioned to think that our mind is where our power is, when the truth is the 18-inch gap that defines most of us is between the mind and the heart. The heart is a second brain of sorts because it is our feeling center. And our feelings are energies in motion and how they are interpreted by the vessel that carries our soul. We have had so much propaganda sold to us from the time that we were born and even before, when we were raised in a womb that had been traumatized. Because that is what has systematically been happening for centuries. The forefathers and mothers who came before each of us went through hardships, tragedies, and travesties that created and invoked cells of fear within them. And those cells of fear ultimately are what have reared us, until we choose to raise our head above the metaphorical parapet, the high and low points along a drawbridge castle or kingdom that we can hide behind, but when we are hiding, it takes a lot more time to move and get where we actually want to go. Which is why the Peaceful Inner Warriors United podcast is designed to help you drop the veils of fear by tuning into your heart, which is how you feel truth, which is truly the only way to know it. Our mind has been conditioned and filled with all kinds of BS, belief systems that we have been taught are correct or wrong. And the truth is, much of what we have been taught go against who we truly are. And anytime we rebutted that or said, but we were told, no, I am the parent, I am the government, I am the teacher. And you need to listen to me because you don't know as much as we do. But so many children are rebelling against a system that is actually sick and makes the one that goes against what is being taught wrong, medicated in order to get them to comply, to take the spark out of their eye. We live in a culture of broken spirits, bulls, that I saw along the roads of the Dallas stockyards, where I went with a group of ladies when I won an incentive trip for a company I worked for selling organic skincare in the UK. Fantastic company. Couldn't bring it back with me to Canada, which is the reason I pulled out of it. But on that trip, I was with these ladies, fellow winners, and as we walked along the streets, having fun, just looking around, experiencing and exploring what I have done in many places, because I understood that the power of our lives is in our ability to move, in our freedom to choose. And so when I won this trip and then got to go to the stockyards and we walked along the streets, there were bulls stood with their masters, tied by a small rope, far less powerful than they were. And these bowls, one of them I sat on because the whole group did and I didn't want to not do it. But when I paid my $5 to get on top of this magnificent creature, what I noticed was the dullness in their eyes. We, too, have become like broken bowl spirits. It's so sad. And yet, we can choose to say we can do better. And it's only us that can do it, because no one is coming to save us. We are the best shot humanity has at actually making it to a higher level of consciousness without becoming slaves as the system would have us be. The system needs broken people. That's why we have been traumatized and raised in that culture of drama, trauma, and betrayal. And betrayal can serve us, because sometimes it is actually the soul that loves us the very most who is willing to give us the lesson that breaks us open in order for us to actually become whole, to stitch ourselves together and find strength we didn't know we had before that break occurred. The Peaceful Inner Warrior series will be where I interview people who have learned truths that you will get to choose how they fit and sit within your map of the world, understanding that each of us have a different map of the world based on the world that we come from. The world we were raised in before we got here, and then the world that we were raised in when we were here. Sometimes by those very same ones we grew in, and other times by different ones. All of that, ultimately, is the culture that we have come to see ourselves as part of until we break away and choose something different. And I say it is time for us to decide to unite in the name of the light, in the name of hope, peace, love, and joy. In the name of freedom, it is to say that the material things that we have may be beautiful, but we don't get to take any of them with us. And so trying to hoard and keep things to ourselves ultimately is a survival mechanism, and our survival mechanisms are directly linked to our reactive mind, which is doing the same thing in the present we have in the past. And it's keeping ourselves safely separate, isolated from others, in order to protect and save ourselves. But the truth is that if we don't step up together and become the wave that all stand together in a circle with the ones that we love that can't stand and defend themselves or us, we put them inside, and then we become like the wave that moves out, radiating and creating the tipping point in collective consciousness that is required and that is happening, regardless of whether we're aware of it or not. There is a clear shift that is taking place, and when the darkness knows they are losing power as they are right now, that is when they will retaliate and do their very best to distract, to eliminate the competition, to eliminate the threat. And if we fall for the BS that we are being sold, we risk freedom, which is ultimately what we are all fighting for. We risk losing it, not just for ourselves and the ones who are here, but for the ones that will come. And if we lose our freedom, we don't get to decide who comes from us if we no longer get to choose who we are with. If we no longer get to choose because we no longer have the power to choose, then we could be having the children of others who we don't want anything to do with, and yet we can no longer say no, just as women previously who got married to someone they were assigned then had to be with them, and if they said no, they got beat, and that was okay because they were property. It's heavy. I understand. And I'm not for everyone. But I am for those who are brave enough to actually have an opinion of their own. My name is Laura J.E. Hamilton. I'm a Canadian farm girl, born and raised as a tobacco farmer's daughter, granddaughter, great-granddaughter. Farmers on the other side too. Ultimately, when I was growing up and working in the fields, not as much as what I could have certainly, but as much as was required, I learned that I didn't want to be spending my life walking fields and doing hard manual labor, and instead wanted to use my mind in order to plant seeds of a different kind. I wanted to plant seeds of hope, passion, inspiration in the hearts of those who felt maybe they didn't have a chance. I wanted to plant seeds of inspiration that reconnected us with this spirit that has always been my fundamental interest. And I've devoted the last 9 years to exploring on a deeper level. First through a coach training that ultimately redefined me when I entered into a relationship with my mentor and spent 4 years with him in England, fitting into his life and comparing myself to others who had already been in the industry for far longer. As a 23-year-old naive farm girl from Canada, then living with the big boy, who was ultimately 18 years older and had experienced a lot more and knew a lot more. And so I gave him my power freely, as I had done, because that was what I was trained to do, as were you. We live in a culture that tells us what to think instead of how to think. Except I had the privilege of attending university and receiving an English degree that ultimately required critical thinking. And so I got to explore what that meant and how to do it. And I brought that with me. And as I stepped into becoming a coach, something that comes naturally to me as an empath, I got to practice my skills at a higher level. And living with the coaching master, as some called him, and he did too, I ultimately learned that coaching is 99% who you are and 1% technique. But we live in a world that values the technique more than the person. And so I tried so hard for so long to get me into a good place to be able to work that technique that came so naturally to me. And in that process, I gave my power away to many more others. And each time they misused the power that I had naively gave them, I judged myself. And I was the one that had been there for all of my mistakes and doubted my ability to be able to help others to the level that I felt needed to happen, because when I was 18 and got my first tattoo, the words I put on my body for the rest of my life were integrity. Because I understood that coming into wholeness with myself was the most important thing that could possibly happen in my life, and was the brand that I would choose to wear for the rest of my life. Integrity is ultimately coming into wholeness with who and whose we truly are. And religion and spirituality have become so diluted that we don't know what to believe, and therefore we don't know who to believe, including ourselves. And that confusion ultimately makes us feel powerless. And when we feel powerless, we give our power to people that we think can yield it and wield it responsibly, and yet most can't. Because we also live in a culture of WIIFM as the main radio station most people are dialed into. And WIIFM stands for What's in It for Me. So many people have an agenda that is hidden. We don't find out about until after they have used us and then tossed us to the side. And we who trusted they had our best interest at heart feel duped and build walls and barriers that then keep good people out, because no longer do we know who to trust, thinking that we could have trusted the one that abused us. Well, I'm sorry to say, but we live in an abusive parental culture. And the culture is a cult you are, because the culture contains the BS, or belief systems, that we give our power to. Just as we've been trained and conditioned to, socialized to do. And when we do it so well, we then find ourselves no longer who we knew ourselves to be all along. We end up having a midlife crisis. And they seem to be coming a lot sooner in life than actually the midpoint now. And mental health issues are on a serious rise because we are being told to live against our inherent nature. When I moved back from England, I ended up working for the coaching company that I'm trained with for a year and a half. Until then, I decided I was going to go it on my own. And in doing so, I ended up creating a video series and then going on many trips in order to get information and access to people that I believed would be able to help me get where I felt I needed to go, which was the world stage. And each time I did these trips and came back seemingly empty-handed, I judged myself because the ones that I had left to do it didn't understand what had taken place in my absence. They just saw the decrease in bank account figures because I was free with that information, which truly is no one else's business. And yet, when we make our business other people's business, then they can judge us based on their standards, which are likely screwed or skewed, whichever one you want to say. But the point is that in being so honest and not really knowing a better way, I just continually gave my power to people that had their own interest at heart in the name of having mine. And many did have my best interest at heart, but they were trying to help me based on what they believed. And our maps of the world were different. And because I didn't have the confidence or willingness to stand in my own power, I did it for far too long, and it sent me to some of the lowest places emotionally that any of us get to. There were times when I wanted to end my life because I didn't understand how to be me in a world that is sick, and yet tells the one that identifies that they are the ones who are sick and need to be fixed. 2019 was a year that truly I became unraveled from the system in a way that I never understood was required. And I needed to, in retrospect, get there before the rest of the world so that I would be ready to lead others who are now entering into or already at the low states that I reached before, because I was living a pre-COVID-19 quarantine-like lifestyle, thinking that building my business and becoming a published author, which is still very important to me, and then being a world speaker and teacher was the most important part. And in being so focused on that goal, which is still so important to me in a different way now, I neglected other aspects of my life. And for that reason, my mental health suffered. I got so righteous and so fixated on my goal without actually understanding how to apply all that I knew, that I unraveled. Because not just of my own issues, but also the judgments of others and the projections that I took personally. That I ended up calling myself into the police in trying to reach the embassy because I was trying to host a preliminary peace summit that I believed was an opportunity for us to come together and bring the best of what we have all come up with together, and then filter and discern all of these stories down to their virtues and values, so that together we could use all of what is here in order to find truth, and then use that as the foundation on which to build the new world order that we together can create, that will be of our interest. The people who have the power and have given it away so freely, until we decide to say, no, we can do this so long as we stop attacking each other and ourselves in the process. Because we have all been there for all of our mistakes, and the big wins too. And oftentimes those big wins came at the expense of things, including people. And when we have done that, sacrificed people, innocence, that then becomes the judgment that we hold against ourselves in reaching the next level if we have not lost touch with our heart, if we have not become so guarded and willing to sacrifice people, places, things. Those matter less, but people matter. We are here together because we are meant to do this together. And there will be many that choose to commit and stay firmly rooted in the system that is falling. We're watching it right now. The monetary system will collapse. And with it, the self-esteem of those who have put everything that they have into getting to the top will find themselves firmly rooted at the bottom of a very deep hole, which was where I wound up when I was trying to live into a measuring system that didn't make any sense to me. Because it's all head-based. It's theory-based. It's financially oriented. It's based on what we have rather than who we are. There's a big shift that's taking place, and that is why it is time for us to become peaceful inner warriors. I started working on a book about this 3.5 years ago, and at that time, April 2017, when I committed to doing this, I did it for the wrong reasons. I did it because I wanted a business card that I could give to people that elevated me and positioned me the way that I was encouraged and almost committed to doing with someone before I even knew specifically what it was that I was trying to get out. And then I tried to do it alone and invested in a self-publishing school opportunity that ultimately gave me content that wasn't helpful because I didn't want to do it on my own. And yet I was trying to follow a system where I could do these things that I didn't really want. And so for a long time, those were just opportunities for me to get clarity, which is what is required within the peaceful inner warrior. Clarity is the key to manifestation, because we essentially are radio transmitters sending out our intentions that are then received by the grand overall designer, the source creator of all that is, including us. We all came from the same source regardless of the label or box we place God into. And ultimately, we have our intention received by the universe, whatever you'd like to call it, and then it is sent back to us through people, places, and things. Opportunities that give us back what we were sending out. But the problem is that so many of us are more fixated on what we don't want than what we do, that we get more of that and wonder why. The acronym for inner that I came up with in the creation of this system is individual needs necessitate emotional resiliency and resonance. Resiliency is a key component to emotional and mental health. Because if we are off emotionally, we are going to be off mentally because our emotions drive our stories. We have to understand it is time for us to unpack that. It is time for us to understand that resiliency comes with understanding how to use our emotions. Abraham Esther Hicks has a fantastic system called the Emotional Guidance Scale, with 22 different levels of emotion that are applied in the high rise of emotional awareness theory I came up with to an apartment building image, just to give you a good visual. And within that apartment building, each floor is one of the emotions, with depression at the very bottom in the basement, where I ironically lived for the last 3 years in my tribe's home base. That's where depression lives. If we don't know how to actually be ourselves amidst the BS of those that we love so much that we want to conform in order to get their acceptance, that can definitely send us out of alignment with who we truly are and keep us looking up for someone else to rescue us, as the victim does on the triangle. The victim looks up to the rescuer to save them from the punisher that ultimately is out for themselves, and they just want power because they feel powerless. And so they take it from others. And the victim gives freely, just wanting to be accepted, until they can't, and then they step into their sacred side, which is the victor, because it is in a universe of polarity that we live, and the victim's counter opposite, which is actually just the other side of the same coin, is the victor, or the warrior. The warrior is the one that knows what they stand for and cannot be sold out. Also remember, we do have 4 survival archetypes, which are the victim, saboteur, child, and prostitute. We'll get into that more later, and Carolyn Mace has a lot of information about these in a book called Sacred Contracts. For one example, you can go investigate further should that be of interest. Now, depression is at the basement level of this high rise of emotional awareness. And peace, passion, joy, empowerment, those are at the very top, in the penthouse of peace, so I call it. I'll break the emotional guidance system and how to maneuver it more consciously and intentionally, one emotional state at a time, so we no longer feel we have to go from 0 to hero. And then also, as mentioned, individual needs necessitate emotional resonance also, because resonance is about where we're at. And if you consider yourself on a scale of 0 to 10, your self-image ultimately is the number that you place on your own head. And if you have a low number on your head, then you are only going to be able to send out intentions and desires, which are the desires, the things that you wish to give birth to. You will only send out that creative power to the lid of your own self-image. So if you believe yourself to be a 6 out of 10, which unfortunately is a high estimation for the populace, many people believe themselves so much lower, and it's unnecessary. It is only because we have given our power away freely and cheaply to people that thought we were cheap, and then only would pay us as much as we would ask, because the universe will only ever give us what we're willing to settle for. And the truth is, there is so much more available above the glass ceiling we place on ourselves with our self-image, which is the reason that I've devoted the last 3.5 years of my life in creating a book that ultimately became part of what I believe to be a better way to see ourselves in the transformation of self-image through the hero's journey from a sacred and soulful perspective. Because we as a people have become starved of the sacred. We have just become scared, which is what happens when we move the C in scared into sacred, or when we take the sacred into a scared place. Same letters, just different ordering. There's a lot of information that we can unpack, and I want to do that with others that I believe have value to offer you, which is what we will do in the Peaceful Inner Warriors United podcast series to follow this. This information hopefully has given you an opportunity to see my heart and to understand that peaceful also is an acronym that I will share today, that you have an opportunity to dig into, understanding that you have the capacity to become a peaceful inner warrior too. And to know that peace is not just about sitting on a meditation pillow and tuning into the zen of the world when we feel so chaotic the rest of our lives. It is about taking consistent action steps that allow us to practice peace through action, which is why peaceful stands for passion, enthusiasm, authenticity, clarity, encouragement. Finding your vibe, understanding what's important to you, loving what arises, and letting go of your attachments to the not now moments that have no power, because all time is happening now like a multi-dimensional layer cake of possibility that we get to tune into and then direct by what we are willing to give our attention to. For where our attention flows, our energy goes, and our attention is driven by our intention. And if we are able to actually become inner warriors, ones who have come to know ourselves, who have taken action to understand what's important to us, what's actually ours, because as empaths, what many people were not necessarily taught from a young age is that we take in the energies around us and think they are ours when they are not. A very quick and easy tool that you can use effectively immediately is when you are feeling an emotional state, just ask yourself, is this mine? And you will receive a yes or no answer. If it is yes, then dig further into what's the meaning of this and coach yourself, which I will share how to do. Not that coaching yourself alone is the best way, but coaching can be very expensive. And so I want to equip you to understand how to ask the questions that help you go deeper and unpeel the onion another layer at a time. But if you ask, is it mine, and you hear no, then you ask, can I let this go? Will I let this go? If not, why not? That's the 4-step process. Is this mine? Yes or no? Can I let it go? Yes or no? Will I let it go? Yes or no? If not, why not? And then you find the story. So oftentimes, especially when we were raised in a womb that was traumatized, that was fearful in nature because of its conditioning, we then have more than 50% of our belief system already fixated in a pattern of fear before we got here. And all we can do now that we're here and have that foundation is unravel it and understand that we may feel and seem crazy at times, because crazy is different. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, which is exactly what the system encourages. It's what the system is based on. Save yourself significant time, energy, and money. System. Well, systems are designed to save themselves, not the people. We, the people, are the ones that are here to save ourselves. There is no Savior that is coming. We are the ones that the universe sent here on assignment in order to be part of the tipping point in collective consciousness that we have a choice now and a chance to be part of, and already are part of. It's just, will we fall victim to an abusive parental culture that teaches us and encourages us to give our power away, to take in substances to get us ordered in our thinking, as if throwing water on a dirty room would clean it? No. If we are willing to actually understand the mess that is required as we find the message, that age comes with experience, which means the message is found through experience, that is when we understand that we are not going crazy. We already were. We just didn't want to own that because we were told it was bad. Well, my friend, cray-cray, as I like to say, ultimately is a really good thing because it shows our individuality, so long as it's not hurting yourself or anyone else. And that craziness that comes with awakening, and let me tell you, absolutely it does, because when we lose the BS that we thought to be true as the foundation of who we knew ourselves to be, and then suddenly have eyes to see the lies of what was oblivious and is now made obvious, it's mind-blowing. And what happens is then we are able to drop into the heart, which is the greatest 18-inch gap any of us will ever maneuver. Our emotions are tools. They teach us who and whose we are. And we become warriors when we understand that it is in the practice that we become the warrior who can win the war. And we must understand that while World War III has not shown up yet, so they say, what I encourage and implore you to understand is we're in it. But it's not what we thought it would be. The nuclear war we were all worried about showed up in 5G as we entered into a 5D state of awareness. And that may not make sense to you, and I am not who can best explain it, but what I understand is it's happening anyway, and I have access to people that can break it down in ways that can help you, which is what this series is intended to do. I will bring you the best, and I promise to give you my best. I promise to not be attached to what you do with the information. I only hope that it will inspire you to actually tune into who you truly are. And at the heart of all of us, we are good, inherently. Every soul is good until the BS covers that and makes us feel as dirty as the veils that we have taken on by others who needed us to be in fear for them to feed. Because energy vampirism is a very real thing. It's not, just like the war, what we thought. We don't see them come and sucking our neck, though that is not happening in places, I'm sorry to say. It's just happened behind closed doors until it's brought to the surface. And the phenomenon of adrenochrome that many have been participating in and telling us, but as a joke, and so we laughed instead of actually understanding that their torturous and savage ways were actually not just jokes. Those are things that will create upheavals in people who can't imagine that what has been going on is actually real. For the truth is stranger than fiction. There's a lot more to be said about all of this. And in this first episode, I simply wanted to introduce you to me and say, I promise to do my very best to guide you to the truth, whatever cost. I promise that it won't be comfortable, but I also promise that it will serve you more than a comfortable life ever will. Because none of us make it safely out of life alive. As a cashier, which is what I've done since the beginning of this pandemic, which I am so grateful, my ego was able to be humbled to the place of accepting a minimum wage paying job in order to be with the people during a fearful pandemic that ultimately allowed me to connect with people that needed some light in a very dark place, and to understand that there is not to fear what we are told. This is about so much more, and my being on the front lines from the very beginning of all of this was the perfect opportunity for me not to buy into the fear and to try to awaken people as they came near, and then to also say that the way that we can do that best is not to play into the conspiracy theories that ultimately are well-founded in terms of what is going on. And if you're interested in those rabbit holes, you can look at Agenda 21, the Sustainability Act. You can look at Agenda 2030. You can read the Georgian Guidestones. You can look at the 2010 Rockefeller report that breaks down everything that's happening now. You can look at Event 201 that took place a month before Wuhan went live with their 5G, which was why so many were falling and dropping like hats as the microwaves were turned on and people started getting fried. Because in China, they care less about their people, unfortunately. And at the time, I was teaching children in China English online from my computer, and I believe that part of my unraveling was because I was tuned into the energy of that, and it was impacting me even though I didn't know what it was. Because as empaths, we don't always understand the information that we're getting. And if we don't know how to ask, is this mine? We can truly go over the edge, and sleep matters because that is when we rest and recharge. I wasn't balanced before I went over the edge. And when psychiatrists and professionals, one, the first, told me to look into Goff's work, holotropic breath therapy, which is how to reach states of enlightenment naturally. And then the others who then wanted to be able to control me and to get me to conform so as to save themselves because of their training, and Indoctrination, a movie that you can check out that is very good, spelt exactly Indoctrination, very punny. But the ones who have been so indoctrinated cannot understand the free thinkers. The doctor that saw me before leaving the system that I got stuck in under the modern day witch hunt, which is what the mental health system is, and gave me so many insights as to what we're now experiencing and could experience should we not band together the way we are being called to, and I am calling you to do now. What he told me is you will fail to self-regulate, and when you do, go to the emergency room. Too much sleep will send you into a depression, and too little sleep will get you manic. And then you'll go over the edge again. And the truth is, I have managed myself up until that point and ever since, other than for the times when I let the lies of the system designed to save itself in to my inner realms to confuse me and lose me, and then get to the place of being willing to say, well, maybe you do know best. And maybe I should try to medicate myself in order to comply and be more reasonable. And maybe it would help, even though I knew I didn't need it and was fundamentally against it. So for 2 weeks after my second intake session, 2 weeks after having left the first, where I was told I would fail to self-regulate, personally guaranteed by that psychiatrist, I then went into a very low space, having ruined my reputation, having went live on Facebook to show people what was going on and to say that I am not insane, which is doing the same thing over again, expecting different results. But instead, I absolutely am cray-cray. By the definition of different, which, yes, absolutely, I am different from this sick system because I am healthy. And I believe in the immune system I was born with to keep me safe and to do its job, just as I encourage you to do too. When I went into a low space 2 weeks after, and I didn't know what to do being in the same space, and then having ruined the relationships I thought had my best interest at heart, but in truth, were only dialed into WIIFM, except for the true ones that stuck around through it. It taught me everything I needed to know in order to do what I am now doing, and hope that you will come along for the journey through. We are in a very messy time. We are giving our power to people that we elected because we thought they had our best interest at heart, and some do. Others are just dialed into WIIFM, and all of them are using their own agenda. We're all doing our best, and we must continue to do our best, to fight for the light, to be willing to say that just because it's the way it's always been and isn't fully broken, the way that you cook a frog is not to put them in hot water, is to put them into lukewarm water and then turn the heat on, because the frog will adjust itself in order to stay neutral. But neutrality kills. We must choose a side, and in truth, the only side there is light. It is only in places where the light has been veiled and overshadowed that darkness lives. It is time for us to return to our own nature. And I hope that you will choose to join me through that journey in the Peaceful Inner Warriors United podcast. September 26th was the day that I was meant to be born. So how befitting that today would be the day that I record the first episode of the Peaceful Inner Warriors United podcast. The one that I actually post, since I have recorded several and not posted those because I didn't feel they were what was required. And now I say, this is enough. We have collectively shared a story of not enough that have undermined all of us. And now I say it is time for us to say enough is as good as a feast. And I look forward to coming to you again very soon with the next episode featuring an expert that I believe you would benefit from hearing. And then filtering, discerning the information that you receive in order to know what it means to you, what it means for you, and what you're going to do with it, as I always encourage you to do. Thank you for listening today. I look forward to coming to you again soon and send you massive love, appreciation, and power. Not because I can give it to you, but I can encourage you to take it back. Lord, namaste. Enlighten me honest, enlighten me.